Hello everyone, welcome to Inside Electronics. So in today's episode I'm going to show you guys this cheap yet fantastic little power supply that I salvaged from an old DVD player. Now there is a date code over here, you can see 26/2/2011. So this thing is 6 years old, but that doesn't matter because you can still buy these power supplies on eBay and Amazon for anywhere from $7 to $10. That makes it really cheap. But this thing is surprisingly good because this thing is designed with serviceability in mind. There is not a single SMD component in this thing anywhere at all. In fact, everything inside this thing is through hole components, so if anything blows up you can easily repair it, no problems at all. And except the fact that they use these Chinese branded capacitors, these Chang'e and YWKSJ, these are all the cheap capacitors, these cheap Chinese capacitors. That is the only problem, I think. That is the only bad side for this thing that I think. Because if you take a look at the bottom side, you can see the clear separation between each distinct sides. This is the high voltage side, this is switching section, and this is the output side, and there is more than a centimeter of separation between the high voltage and low voltage side, except this side, which is of course limited because of the size of optocoupler they use. But other than that, there is more than enough separation. There is more than a centimeter separation over here and that is really good. And this switch, I got this thing from a DVD player, as I mentioned earlier, and that used the standoff type of connector, the standoff poles, and the wires were soldered onto it. And because it was really trouble to desolder them, the tracks actually came off when I was desoldering it. And this is where the switch was, this is where the AC input was, and that is how everything was connected. I just shorted it using a piece of wire. This thing works perfectly fine. In fact, it has a fuse over here. It uses a fuse. Let's take a look. It is it's a 2 amps 250 volts fuse. That's a good thing, that they use the replaceable type of fuse. Normally the cheap circuit boards usually contains the track as a fuse. They just design a track with a very thin trace as a fuse. That makes it really difficult. When that thing blows up, it makes a huge mess, and that basically is not a good idea to use such thing. It is actually really good for a replaceable fuse like this one. And there is a lot of unpopulated components over here. As you can see, they use the 10. These are also Chinese, but they are actually using proper X-rated capacitor, and there is enough space for another X-rated capacitor over here, and also a discharge resistor, but they are unpopulated. And there are few capacitors that are for the grounding purpose. But if you take a look at you can see that this side, the AC main side, is not grounded, but this side is. The output ground is connected to a terminal, a tab over here, which is then screwed onto the DVD case using a metallic screw. So in fact the entire case of the DVD player is ground reference to the DC ground section over here. Speaking of which, let's talk about the IC that they're using. They're using the very popular Viper 22A, Viper 22A IC, which is a very popular 60 kHz switching IC. And in fact, there are a lot of versions of Viper IC, like Viper 112A, Viper 22A, and I'm thinking the Viper 12A, the 12 stands for the continuous drain current, which is not 12 but it is 1.2 amps, and in this case it is Viper 22A, which means that it can handle up to 2.2 amps of continuous drain current. And the circuit is really simple. In fact, as you can see, it has an AC input side which is now having a common mode choke, an X-rated capacitor, and it's going straight to these rectifiers over here. Let me turn off this light, and so you can see there is a clear separation. You can clearly see the separation between each stages. And then it is connected to a 22 microfarad 400 volt smoothing capacitor, of course the Chinese branded, and it uses the Viper 2A. Even though this thing is an 8-pin package, not all the pins are actually used. In fact, if you take a look at the IC itself, you can see this is the IC, and the entire top row of pins, and the entire top row of pin is the drain, is dedicated for the drain terminal, and two of the bottom side pins are the first and second pins are for the source of the internal MOSFET, and it uses an extra two pins, for one for feedback and one for the power supply. That is the only terminals that are used in SIP. Even though it uses 8 pins, it is actually basically it's a 1 2 3, it's a 4-pin device. Basically it's for the current handling. They are using these 8 pins over here, and it uses the conventional these capacitor and diode is for the protection, the crowbar protection, I think, for the transformer primary side, and this diode and this capacitor is for the initial kick starting of this IC. And once that is started, the secondary side is really simple. And by the way, when talking about the secondary, this thing can output 12 volts, plus 12, minus 12, and 5 volts. There is no plus or minus 5. The 5 volt is only plus 5 volts, but it can output 12 volts and minus 12 volts. And I've seen some power supplies that can actually do 3.3 volts also from the SMPS itself, but nowadays most of the circuit board, most of the DVD players are using separate 3.3 volt chips for deriving the 5 volts from deriving 3.3 volts from the 5 volt power supply rates. And this thing is for the DVD, so the 12 volt power supply is used for the motor and the DVD spindle motor and the tray eject motor. 5 volt is for the main operating circuit board, and it uses the 1N5822 diode. This one right here is a 1N5822 the Schottky diode. This thing is 3 amp diode, and the secondary side is really simple. All they have is the connection going straight to the diode. It rectifies it, and it is then applied to this CLC filter, CLC, or it is also known as the pipe filter. So it goes to this capacitor through the inductor, another capacitor, and its output is straight connected to this 5 volt power supply over here. And the 12 volt and minus 12 volt is derived using these two diodes over here. This one is an HER205, which is an fast recovery diode, and for the positive volt they are using the normal diode configuration and this capacitor for smoothing, and it is outputted, and its output is connected straight to this pin over here, and it's also connected to this pin over here. You can see from here it's connected straight to that. So the 12 volts are common, and for the negative, for the minus 12 volt, they are using a diode in the opposite polarity, so that normally if the diode is connected in that direction, in this case for the negative they are using the negative side, and they are also using the capacitor in reverse for smoothing that 12 volts, and it is then connected to the minus 12 volt terminal. So basically speaking, that is pretty much it. And there is one more component over here, which is the TL431A, which is a precision adjustable reference power supply, reference voltage generator. That is used for, I think that is because the way it is connected, I think that is what used to trigger the feedback mechanism, because these resistors, these are actually voltage dividers that are connected to the reference pin of this chip right here, this IC right here. And there is also one more thing that is surprising, because only the 5 volt side is used for voltage reference. These resistors are only connected to the 5 volt terminal. In fact, they are connected straight across the output of the diode, and that is what used to that is what used as a reference for this IC over here. There is no regulation at all. There is no resistors or anything connected across the 12 volt and minus 12 volt range. I don't know why. Maybe because the 12 volt is only used for the motor and other power things. I think it is not that critical. It is the 5 volt that is actually doing the stuff. So basically they are thinking like that, and maybe that is the reason why they are only using 5 volt as a reference. And also the 12 volt is also used for the amplifier, the audio amplifier. The DVD player that I got this thing from has a separate audio amplifier that is also using a 12 volt and which is connected to this one also here. In fact, these two are going straight to that. One is used for there's a fan that I found at the back of the DVD player. It's a tiny little fan, and yeah, basically that's it. So that's it. That's pretty much it. This thing is really simple, but this thing is, and by the way, this thing can output 5 volts at 3 amps and 12 volts at like 1.5 amps. I think that is the output capacity of this thing. So yeah, surprisingly good little power supply for around $10. Even though this thing is cheap, it is 100% serviceable. That makes it really good for its value. Anyway, I hope everything is explained. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you in another video.